from our studios in Los Angeles and Tampa, this is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. I'm Philip from Gantom Lighting and Controls. I'm joined, as always, by my delightful co-host, Scott Swenson of Scott Swenson Creative Development. On Green Tag, we look at the top news each week, and we try and pick the stories we think are the most impactful for professionals in the theme park and theme entertainment space. This week, though, I think we're going to choose one because it's a little near and dear to Scott's heart, I think. And it is that Busch Gardens and SeaWorld have finally moved into the IP Halloween game because they are bringing IPs from Sony to all the five Howl-O-Scream instances happening this Halloween season. Basically, it's two big IPs that Sony has this partnership with United Parks on. It is I Know What You Did Last Summer and Anaconda. And Busch Gardens Tampa and Busch Gardens Williamsburg will get Anaconda. And I Know What You Did Last Summer will go to all the SeaWorld, Orlando, San Diego, and San Antonio parks. And that's the gist of it. We can go into some of the details, but basically the only other thing that is interesting about this is that on Anaconda, there are actually different storylines that tell different parts of the story. So the houses are different from a story standpoint. Tampa gets Anaconda, Fear Has No Escape, and Williamsburg gets Anaconda, Dead on Arrival. And in both instances, for both IPs, Sony says it's the first time that they've been licensed in this way for a large Halloween event to do a physical walkthrough type of thing at a haunted house, the first haunted house they've done. And of course, CEO Mark Swanson gave different press releases about this, but basically, I don't know. He said, our fans are looking for new and immersive scares, and bringing Anaconda to our Howl-O-Scream event elevates the experience at both Busch Gardens parks. The addition of Anaconda, combined with all new haunts entertainment, will solidify Howl-O-Scream's spot as one of the nation's top Halloween events. Will it, Mark? On I Know What You Did Last Summer, he said, this thrilling franchise has captivated horror fans for years with its suspense and terror. Now our guests will step into the world, facing some of the same heart-pounding moments that make the film come alive. As one thrilling part of the lineup of haunted houses, scare zones, and live entertainment immersive experiences, we are excited to deliver what we believe is our most ambitious Howl-O-Scream yet. Scott, you have a history with United Parks and specifically with Busch Gardens in Tampa. How do you feel about
Howl-O-Scream in general? Yeah.
Yeah, Howl-O-Scream in general. That's right. A large history. Maybe catch us up on your history and tell us what you think about Anaconda.
So, yeah. Back in the day, I was part of the team that created Howl-O-Scream at Busch Gardens in Tampa. And then for the first 15 years, I was part of the creative team, sometimes the creative director, sometimes the creative producer, sometimes just creative consultant, just depended on the year. And so I was involved with the creative for Howl-O-Scream at Busch Gardens for the first 15 years. I then have gone on to write haunts for SeaWorld Howl-O-Scream in Orlando and SeaWorld Howl-O-Scream in San Antonio. And I've consulted on a couple of haunts at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. So I know the early days of this product very, very well. And I have continued to go and visit. I still have friends who work here in Tampa and in San Antonio. I know Roland Garcia is still very much involved there. So here's the things that I find interesting about this particular announcement. First, going back in the Wayback Machine to the first 15 years of the event, we were always jealous that Universal had all the IPs. And Universal was always jealous that we didn't have our hands tied by the IPs. So we could come up with new and unique stuff, and Universal had to follow the IP brand guides and then had to get sign off every step of the way, to have the directors of famous films come through and do a final walkthrough. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. But if they didn't like what they saw, then there was a lot of struggle to get back to where they could actually open, because it's written in a lot of those agreements that they don't open if they don't get final approval. So one of the things that Busch Gardens Howl-O-Scream had was the fact that because we didn't have to spend so much money just to say whatever the IP was, we could invest that into the product itself. There was one year where we actually kind of broke down and we couldn't get hard numbers, but based on general soft numbers, we were able to say that our operational budget, not including capital, but our operational budget would have been taken up completely by the number of IPs that Halloween Horror Nights had in Orlando. So, and that's just the rights to be able to call things by these existing names. So, it also meant that in Orlando, they had to have significantly higher numbers because the audience wasn't necessarily seeing the investment that they pay for the IP. Flip side of that is you don't have to tell any backstory. Everybody knows the intellectual properties. They know the backstory of all this stuff. And for Universal, I think it was kind of essential because, that was back in the day where they were still riding on the coattails of Ride the Movies. And so it was kind of in their brand warehouse or their brand wheelhouse to actually bring those great haunt properties to life. And everybody thought that they were actually all Universal films, but they were not. So they had to lease everything pretty much except Classic Monsters. That was the only thing Universal actually never had to lease. But anytime they did Freddy or Jason or oh God, so many, American Werewolf in London, all of those, they spent more money up front before they ever painted a single set piece or even built a single set piece than Howl-O-Scream did. And that was just on the IPs. So we intentionally took the route because we didn't have the numbers. We didn't have the budgets early on. We intentionally took the route to avoid IP and to create our own compelling storylines. In this world now, and Philip and I were just talking about this before the show, where people only like what they know, that's why IPs are becoming more and more important, more and more essential, especially for Halloween events. So it makes sense that they're moving in that direction slowly. The one curiosity, and I've seen other parks do this when they start to invest in IPs, they make up for it by doing less product because they have to divert some of that budget to pay for the IP. So the product itself is smaller, and then they get frustrated because they think, well, gosh, we clearly didn't pick the right IP. No, people don't come for a single IP. They come for the entire event. And when the entire event gets smaller. Now, I don't know whether Busch Gardens and SeaWorld are going to do this or not. This is I'm just sharing theory, and actual practice at the time, with some of my clients and some of the projects that I've worked on. So I'm hoping that they have added the price of the IP onto the budget and aren't going to be required to pull it from the budget. Because I have no idea. I mean, I knew back, 26 years ago, I knew what it was back then, but I don't know now what these IPs will go for or sell for, what the agreement is, any of that. So the fact they're going down that road, I trust the team at Busch Gardens because I know a lot of them actually, a lot of the people who are now doing most of the design work were people that I worked with, people that I trust, people that I respect, people that are really, in all fairness, doing better work than we did when I was there. So I'm very excited about that side of it. I'm hoping that they will still have the finances and the resources now that the IP is in place. So there's the whole IP, non-IP storyline. Where does the money come from? All of that. So hopefully they've got all that figured out. And if not, they're going to soon discover that they need to get it figured out. The next question I have is the IP itself. Now, one of the things that we were never allowed to do back in the day, now I realize it's a completely different world and the parks have changed significantly, but one of the things we were never allowed to do, even when we weren't doing IP, was any sort of animal attack. Right. We were never allowed to do anything that portrayed any species as a danger to humans or as a predator of humans. And so when I saw Anaconda, I was like, well, these days have changed. That is unique, and again, working with so many zoos, it's a little bit like fingernails on a chalkboard to me, because it was so ingrained in me. Now, is it wrong? No, I can't say that it's wrong because I think everybody knows that it's fantasy. Got it. But it's just so, it is such a 180 from the early days of Howl-O-Scream, and I think that is what is a little bit hard for me to swallow. So I guess what I'm saying is intellectually I understand it. It ties to the day product, which is why we wanted to do it back in the day. It was something that everybody said in all of our focus groups. Why doesn't Busch Gardens do something about animals escaping and eating people? And we were like, that would be great. That's, it ties into it's making fun of our day product, and we're, everybody knows that it's not real. And the powers that be at that time were like, no, I don't care what they want. They don't know what they want. We can't do it. And I was like, okay. So we didn't. So the fact that it's Anaconda, the fact that it is a giant snake, it's a giant reptile that does actually exist. It's not a space alien anaconda. It is a species that exists, is part of the ecosystem, and plays a very important part of that ecosystem. And the fact that anacondas they don't very often, but can actually kill people or large animals. So just the fact that it became Anaconda was my first, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Then when it went on when I read a little deeper into this story and discovered that they're doing Anaconda both here and Williamsburg, what that means is that they've got two stories so that next year they can flip-flop them. I'm guessing they probably have pretty much the same footprint, if that's at all possible, if they were planning ahead, so that they can literally just flip-flop some props. They can send things from Virginia to Florida, send things from Florida to Virginia, and everything's a brand new show. And then my final thought was, I went back to my very first moment when I saw Anaconda, and I didn't even realize it was an IP, because the 2025 film I did not see. I immediately went to, the movie from 97. Oh, okay. But this is exactly how these kinds of IPs work. It's when like Sony, the owner of the IP, wants to bring it back so that they can continue to reinforce it. There have been many films based in the Anaconda iconography, and I only saw the first one, and that was more than enough for me, quite honestly. But I think that I think it's a cool idea. I still have a venue flow in my computer for a serpentarium that goes, a visit to a serpentarium that goes horribly, horribly wrong. And you actually entered through a broken habitat. So you walked in and you saw broken glass, and you walked into the habitat and were followed by snakes throughout the entire thing. But again, that was back in the day where we couldn't do anything negative with animals. So
yep.
It's been something they've been trying to do. I'm glad they're doing it. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But once again, I hope they have taken into consideration that what they have to pay for the IP has to be on top of what it's going to take them to execute it. As I alluded to, when you execute an IP, it has to be done to a certain level, a certain standard that is based on the IP holder. And so sometimes it is actually even more expensive, not always, but sometimes it's actually even more expensive to install an IP, because you can't just say, well, I changed the story because instead of finding a tow truck, I found a tractor. So we put a tractor in there, and we're going to make that a scary tractor as opposed to a scary tow truck. You can't do that with the IP. We couldn't find, and I will tell you, another reason that the snake thing never flew is it was very, very difficult. Now, this was many years ago, so the technology has changed, but it was very difficult to create a convincing snake, and even more difficult to create convincing small snakes. Convincing bigger snakes are easier now because there's some animatronics out there that are quite good. But then they're going to have to probably repaint them to match the Anaconda from the IP. So there's a lot of things involved. I think it's a good thing to try. I think, I know what you did last summer. The Final Catch makes total sense for SeaWorld. And I'm hoping that they have a way to do it as well. But I just hope that they have thought through all of the challenges, and I'm sure that they have. Whether they've executed on them or not, I don't know. But I am hoping that it gives a little bit of extra attention to these events, because I'm going to be completely straightforward with Busch Gardens Tampa. After I left and a lot of my team left, the quality, in my opinion, went down and has slowly been building back up over the last few years. And I think that the team is in place, and I can only speak for Williamsburg because that's the only one I really still know the team. The team is in place who could execute this. Whether they will have the funds to do it or not, and the freedom to do it or not, that's a completely separate story that I'll never know the answer to. But fingers crossed for them, because I think it'll be a really cool. I think it can be a really cool addition to the event.
There was a lot there.
It was a lot there. Sorry,
I knew there was going to be a lot. I think that yeah. I mean, I can say it, but because I go to the events, but the quality of these parks is not good. I don't think that's a surprise. I think that they're probably competing for Six Flags in the game of least quality park, and I think Six Flags is probably winning because at least their CEO understands what they're doing in terms of seasonal events, and we just talked about how they had a whole seasonal outlay. So I think that's I don't think anyone would really argue that the Howl-O-Scream events are like competitive. Really, I don't think so. Maybe San Diego because there's the only thing there, but I don't know. Anyway, I just think
the best. I mean, honestly, I hate to say this, Tampa team, but the best one I've been to is San Antonio.
Yeah.
As an overall event, I think there are elements at Tampa that are done really, really well. But
yeah. But I think to your point, that's going to be the hardest thing for me is understanding, like, this is already an event where the creative production was a little inconsistent is what I will say. Inconsistent across the product. Like, the product was not fully consistent even before this. There were a lot of all the events had patches that were sort of not themed well. It wasn't a solid core product to begin with, and now you're throwing this wrinkle in. Now the one side of this could be that this is exactly what they need. Like, if, to your point, if they add a whole budget on top to pay for IP, this could be what the event needs to kind of break out, where attracts a new audience, brings in fresh attention, fresh thing. But if it's the flip side, like you laid out, and they are not spending more, they're just doing less because they have less money, I think that's going to be not great. But at the same time, they probably need to try something, because we've been talking about how United Parks is one of the only ones that they're not doing well at all, despite what their CEO keeps saying on the earnings, where they think that their stock is being undervalued. Well, they're being undervalued because you're not doing well. Like, like, come on, like, where every time they just complain that they're being undervalued and their property is actually really good and they keep doing buybacks and all this. I mean, they're just trying to line everything up so that they can sell the property, right? It's a private equity play. So I think writ large, United Parks has a lot of problems. I'm not convinced even their leadership is thinking about what it's going to take to turn it around. Not in the same way that we've had the new Six Flags team talk extensively about their plans and about bringing back seasonal, about why entertainment is important. You see none of that at United Parks. And so I think that that gives me pause in all of this, where it seems like it could be like they need to do something, but the only way this is going to work is if they do it correctly. And based off of everything else that they've done, I'm not convinced that it's going to go that route.
Well, and why is Six Flags looking at that? Who is in charge? A former SeaWorld guy.
Yep.
So
yeah, and speaking of
from the golden era, golden era of the parks.
Right. And they understand. I mean, look at, they're really investing at the Six Flags parks into the seasonal, the seasons of fun is coming back to that. We've talked about this ad nauseum, but even we got more announcements about Christmas plans this last week, and Six Flags is bringing Jason Universe to 3 of their parks. That was other news that came out around the same time that we heard of Anaconda and I Know What You Did Last Summer. So they're bringing Jason. It came from Universal, so it just had to run at Universal. So there's probably some crossover interest with people who saw it at a theme park and are interested in that again. And it's a much more relatable. I think you kind of hinted at it. I didn't do the data yet, but I'm sure I can.
And I'm sure you will, because that's.
I'm sure I will look at the overall
whether
search
you share it or not, you will look at it just for your own benefit.
I will try and figure out. But it just strikes me as these are not incredibly popular IPs in the way that like Jason is popular. In terms of it's just like a Halloween staple. Versus Anaconda is kind of like, and then I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then I didn't even think about the animal attack thing, but that's another concern. Like, and that's kind of damage that a brand has already had some damage in their history. You don't want. I mean, now they're bringing something that could potentially damage that brand again. And with both stories, I Know What You Did Last Summer is also kind of in that realm. It's not as bad as Anaconda. That's really bad. I don't know.
I'm surprised that the board has let it through. I'm very surprised, because I know, there must
have been something else that Sony has produced that you could have chosen.
But just in writing educational material for United Parks, I know how sensitive they are to animal issues, animal care issues, the way animals are portrayed. I am surprised. Now, like I said, I personally see nothing wrong with it, because we tried to do it too. But yeah. I am surprised that things have changed so much that it is allowed.
What? Right. I definitely don't agree, though, with the CEO. This is going to make it one of the premier events in the country. It's not. I mean, One Haunted House does not a premier Halloween event make. Anyway, so that's probably more opinion, though. I'm sure somebody out there thinks that it's the best Halloween event in the nation, but not me. And the only other thing I want to talk about this story is the concept also of that we've talked about a little bit, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the concept of how essentially it's back to the pendulum thing, right? Where now this is corporate kind of dictating what you're going to build at your parks, as opposed to previously where each park made their own full slate. And now it's not 100%, right? This is just one haunt at all of these houses. And each United Parks park has different haunted houses that support this. So not all of them have put up their announcements. Actually, some of them have put up nothing, and some have put up just their entire slate. We know a lot about what's going to Tampa and Orlando and San Diego, and less about the other parks. And they're all doing unique original houses that are all different. But this is potentially starting to go back in the opposite direction, which is where you are deciding this is what you're going to do at your event. And so it again, that good and bad thing, because then I don't know. Let's talk about that, Scott.
Since the beginning of Howl-O-Scream, there has always been a give and take, and sometimes a push and pull between local and corporate. Right. Here's the thing, you're not going to get on the park level, you're not going to be able to negotiate and afford IP. So that has to be done on the corporate level. Had they not done, the 5 parks with the 2 different IPs, that could not have been negotiated on the park level, or probably wouldn't have been negotiated on the park level. So that's where the corporate overlord stepping in is helpful. You can actually get a little more buying power. They have tried for many years to take concepts and haunts and shift them to other parks. The problem is none of the parks have the same or even close to the same facilities and infrastructure. So you end up spending. It sounds like a great premise when you can say, "Oh, we're just going to take this haunt and move it from SeaWorld Orlando to SeaWorld San Antonio." Except the building is different, the infrastructure is different, the power is different, the audience is different, and the haunt that's next door to it is very similar to it, but in San Antonio, but not in Orlando. So there's a lot of elements that make it difficult to be modular. If corporate really wanted to help, my recommendation would be for corporate to invest in identical infrastructure, or at least one identical building in each of the 5 parks, so that you could then do you could build 3 haunts that are amazing that you can bus and truck and rotate them. It's what ICE does. It's what Gaylord does.
Yeah, that's right.
It's what Ringling Circus did for years. You always have a new show if you've got the same venue in all the parks. And that it sounds really simple. I'm being overly simplistic. That would be difficult based on the layouts of the parks. I understand that. But to me, that's the way to really get the most buying power for having corporate be more involved.
Well, it's similar to, they can do that with shows, right? So I keep bringing back Six Flags because United Parks doesn't do this, which is the point. But I mean, looking at Six Flags, the Monster Stomp, right? That moves around and moves to various locations because it's a theater show, and theaters are built to a relatively similar specification. You have a stage, you have lighting, you're able to move these different theatrical shows and mount them. And so you get that at the Six Flags. And I will say also with The Conjuring, that was a similar thing where a big reason of why they chose to do The Conjuring Beyond Fear at the locations they did is because they had permanent covered facilities at those locations that were relatively close in square footage-ish. And they are all different, but they're not wildly different. And so they're able to produce things that are, it's a different layout, it's technically a different layout, but they're able to kind of keep it relatively similar, right? And again, on the buying power thing, we've seen that with other parks as well. With the Jason Universe I just mentioned, is going to 3 parks, right? And who knows why they chose the 3 parks, but it could be, to your point, it could be because they have footprints there that are similar, and they can just not have to. Because that's the other part of it, right? I mean, you're having to pay more when you're designing different footprints, and then you're building entirely different layouts.
And once you have to build an entirely different layout, your economy of scale drops significantly.
Right.
Because everybody's like, well, we've already got the story. That's great. But now you've got to do a completely new design on that story. So, and I know that because I was involved with one of the, back in the day, they wanted to take one of the haunts that I had written for Busch Tampa and move it to SeaWorld Orlando. And they ended up scrapping the project because it got so cost prohibitive to move it and change the footprint completely. Because again, so much of where SeaWorld and Busch Gardens put their haunts, at least back in the day, and to a certain extent even now, are in buildings or locations that are not being used for other things. They're what I call formerlies. It's kind of like it was formerly this attraction or this habitat, and now it's a haunted house. It's sort of like where Spirit Halloween pops up, surprise. So if, like I said, if corporate really wanted to be an asset to the individual parks, find the grand scheme money to put as identical as possible buildings and facilities with the same entrance and exits.
Yep.
So that they can literally just bus and truck. They can just literally lift the scenic from one location, move it to the new location, and then they could do 1 year of 5 new houses that would cover them for 5 years in all of their properties.
Yep.
So, Anaconda, the Slither Tour. I don't know. Anyway. All right, well, we got way in the weeds on this one, as we knew we would. So anyway,
true.
that is our time. And once again, guys, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed listening to me reminisce a little bit about the way Busch Gardens is, and hopefully looking forward to making it once again a nationwide contender for one of the top Halloween experiences. It was there at one time, and hopefully someday it will be there again. If it's not already, again, I can't really make those comparisons with a whole lot of without being biased in some way. So anyway, thank you guys so much on behalf of Philip Hernandez with Gantom Lighting and Control and myself, Scott Swenson from Scott Swenson Creative Development. This is Green Tagged Theme Park in 30, and we will see all of you next week.